Hey everybody. So I'm figuring out how to do some more things. And I figured today I'd just read a part or two of Treasure Island. It's books in the public domain, and my D&D party's recently gone on a little pirate adventure, so I'm just kind of in the mood for a nice pirate story. So I found some background music, so you guys don't have to just listen to my voice in a quiet but staticky background. Um, the reason I want to keep this short is because I don't know if it's gonna work the way I want it to. So I want to do a small piece and listen back to it and see if it worked and fix it next time. But yeah, I guess the first book we're gonna be reading over here is Treasure Island. In chat, I'm gonna put a link to the music that I'm about to put on. Um, and also a link to where I'm reading the book, just so anyone has it, if they want it. It'll also be in the description of the YouTube video, if that goes up. Okay, so like if this whole thing ends up being a train wreck, I'm just gonna delete the footage and we're gonna pretend like this never happened, and I'm gonna start over next time. So, yeah, that's just how that's gonna be because I don't have the fortitude to play the stream while I'm streaming because then I would hear myself and that is honestly the worst thing in the world. So I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna have a good time and I'll see if it's garbage or not. Alright, let me start the music. Now OBS tells me that that is a really good volume in proportion to my voice, so I'm gonna believe it. And I'll make adjustments if necessary later in other streams. But all hail Grim Music World for putting this up royalty free um, for us to use. Let me see who wrote it. Specifically, thanks to Darren and Brandon Fichter. I read that like a German. Oops. Who said that they composed all this stuff. It's really nice. About an hour long, so it's probably longer than I need for right now. But I skipped through it a little bit and I really liked it. I'll have to check out some more of their stuff. Anyway, all right. From starting soon to live scene. Ah, there it is. Okay. And then I'm just gonna actually check the stream on another window real quick. Um, okay, good. It's working. Yay. Mute that again. Alright, so the link I have today for this book comes from the amazing, wonderful, fabulous Project Gutenberg, who's made it kind of their mission to take a bunch of like old books and stuff and get digital copies of them online for everyone to look at if they want to. It's a massive library of stuff, and it's all free. It's purely a labor of love. And it says, this ebook is for use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away, or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.com. If you are not located in the United States, you'll have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this book. So, definitely go to the website, give those guys some love, find them on socials. Um, they're really doing amazing stuff. Um, and all of their little things have this start of this Project Gutenberg ebook, Treasure Island, or whatever title you're of the book that you're looking at. It's really amazing. The only bad thing about it is that there aren't page numbers all the time in these Project Gutenberg ebooks. It's just kind of a long stream of web page that you kind of scroll through. So I figure if I'm going to be using a Project Gutenberg ebook, then I'll just be doing it by section. So for instance, with Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson and illustrated by Lewis Reed. Look at this amazing picture. And we'll come back to that. But oh, look how great that is. In this table of contents, there's like a big part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, part 6, and then there's these little sub chapters and stuff. I figure I'll be splitting up these streams um, by maybe by parts, depending how fast I end up reading because I'm nervous. Um, but for today, I want to get through, maybe chapter 1 or chapter 2. I don't want this to be very long at all because I am still experimenting with how this works. But um, on other days when I'm actually going for it, I think I would do about a part per stream. Oh no, my music stopped. There it is. So, yeah, that's how this is gonna go. But let's go look at these pictures. They're so good. Like, this is a little pixely, and I imagine if it is for me, it's gonna be for y'all too. This parrot giving me life. And he, like, little Long John over here just looks vaguely concerned and has a sword. These guys are so angry. Who are you angry at? Let me see. And then there's this one that's really cool. I like that dope Jolly Roger with a really toothy smile. It's a really interesting Jolly Roger. I always like a woodcut art because you can just see like the grains of the wood that's used to make it, and it's always just really interestingly textured pictures. But anyway, I'm sorry. We're here to read. Ooh, there's a list of illustrations too. I'm probably gonna ignore this. We might revisit it later if anybody's interested. But yeah, but they're all just called lines from the book, which I think is pretty neat. Dedication. To S.L.O., an American gentleman in accordance with whose classic taste the following narrative has been designed, it is now, in return for numerous delightful hours, and with the kindest wishes, dedicated by his affectionate friend, the author. Oh yeah, also, um, I don't know if any of y'all have watched the Muppet Treasure Island movie or seen any other like iterations of Treasure Island where the English has been modernized. Um, but this isn't gonna be that. So I pride myself on being able to read pretty well, even if I do talk too fast and stumble over my words because of it. Um, but this is an English not quite like the English we speak today. So I may have to take my time with it a little bit. My inflections might be a little weird until I get into the groove of it. Don't judge me. Be kind. We're all here to just read about pirates together. But there's a little invocation here to the hesitating purchaser. If sailor tales to sailor tunes, storm and adventure, heat and cold, if schooners, islands and maroons, and buccaneers, and buried gold, and all the old romance retold exactly in the ancient way, can please, as me they pleased of old, the wiser youngsters of today, so be it, and fall on. If not, if studious youth no longer crave, his ancient appetites forgot, Kingston or Ballantyne the brave, or Cooper of the wood and wave, so be it also, and may I and all my pirates share the grave where these and their creations lie. A little weird, but I like it. I like it. Gives some atmosphere. Okay, so here's a map. That's really neat. Treasure Island, August 1750. It's really beautiful. Alright, Treasure Island, Part 1, The Old Buccaneer. Admiral Benbow Inn. Hang on, let me get my coffee. I made some espresso because I knew my voice would protest, as it usually does, at my speaking this much. So, I made some coffee for myself. That's good. That's some good stuff. Mm-mm. Ooh, it's a really intense part of this music right now. Okay. Part the first. The old sea dog at the Admiral Benbow. Mm-mm. Look at that S. That is such a nicely ornamented S. Anyway. Squire Trelawney, Dr. Livesey, and the rest of these gentlemen having asked me to write down the whole particulars about Treasure Island, from beginning to the end, keeping nothing back but the bearings of the island, and that only because there is still treasure not yet lifted. I take up my pen in the year of grace 17 something, and go back to the time when my father kept the Admiral Benbow Inn, and the brown old seaman with the sabre cut first took up his lodging under our roof. I remember him as if it were yesterday, as he came plodding to the inn door, his sea chest following behind him in a hand barrow, a tall, strong, heavy, nut-brown man, his tarry pigtail falling over the shoulder of his soiled blue coat, his hands ragged and scarred, with black, broken nails, and the sabre cut across one cheek, a dirty, livid white. I remember him looking around the cove and whistling to himself as he did so, and then breaking out in that old sea song that he sings so often afterwards. Don't worry, guys, you're not going to have to listen to me sing, even though I might put on a goofy pirate voice every once in a while for this. But 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. In the high, old, tottering voice that seemed to have been tuned and broken at the capstan bars. Then he rapped on the door with a bit of stick like in a handspike that he carried, and when my father appeared, called roughly for a glass of rum. This, when it was brought to him, he drank slowly, like a connoisseur, lingering on the taste, and still looking about him at the cliffs and up at our signboard. "This is a handy cove," says he at length, "and a pleasant situated grog shop. Much company, mate?" My father told him no, very little company, the more was the pity. "Well, then," said he, "this is the berth for me. Here, you matey," he cried to the man who trundled the barrow, "bring up alongside and help up my chest. I'll stay here a bit," he continued. "I'm a plain man. Rum and bacon and eggs is what I want, and that head up there for to watch the ships off. What you mought call me? You mought call me captain. Oh, I see what you're at. There," and he threw down 3 or 4 gold pieces on the threshold. "Ye can tell me when I've worked through that," says he, looking fierce as a commander. And indeed, bad as his clothes were, and coarsely as he spoke, he had none of the appearance of a man who sailed before the mast, but seemed like a mate or skipper accustomed to be obeyed or to strike. The man who came with the barrow told us the mail had set him down the morning before at Royal George, that he had inquired what inns were along at the coast, and hearing ours was well spoken of, I suppose, and described it as lonely, had chosen it from the others as his place of residence. And that was all we could learn of our guest. He was a very silent man by custom. All day he hung round the cove or upon the cliffs with a brass telescope. All evening he sat in a corner of the parlour next to the fire and drank rum and water very strong. Mostly he would not speak when spoken to, only look up sudden and fierce, and blow through his nose like a foghorn, and we and the people who came about our house soon learned to let him be. Every day when he came back from his stroll he would ask if any seafaring men had gone by along the road. At first we thought it was the want of company of his own kind that made him ask this question, but at last we began to see he was desirous to avoid them. When a seaman did put up at the Admiral Benbow, as now and then some did, making by the coast road for Bristol, he would look in at him through the curtained door before he entered the parlour, and he was always sure to be as silent as a mouse when any such was present. For me, at least, there was no secret about the matter, for I was, in a way, a sharer in his alarms. He had taken me aside one day and promised me a silver fourpenny on the first of every month if I would only keep my weather eye open for a seafaring man with one leg, and let him know the moment he appeared. Often enough, when the first of the month came round, and I applied to him for my wage, he would only blow through his nose at me and stare me down, but before the week was out he was sure to think better of it, bring me my fourpenny piece, and repeat his orders to look out for the seafaring man with one leg. How that personage haunted my dreams, I need scarcely tell you. On stormy nights, when the wind shook the four corners of the house, and the surf roared along the cove and up the cliffs, I would see him in 1,000 forms, with 1,000 diabolical expressions. Now the leg would be cut off at the knee, now at the hip. Now he was a monstrous kind of creature who had never had but the one leg, and that in the middle of his body. To see him leap and run and pursue me over the hedge and ditch was the worst of nightmares, and altogether I prayed pretty dear for my monthly fourpenny piece in the shape of those abominable fancies. But though I was so terrified by the idea of the seafaring man with one leg, I was far less afraid of the captain himself than anybody else who knew him. There were nights when he took a deal more rum and water than his head would carry, and then he would sometimes sit and sing his wicked old wild sea songs, minding nobody. But sometimes he would call for glasses round and force all the trembling company to listen to his stories or bear a chorus to his singing. Often I have heard the house shaking with yo ho ho and a bottle o' rum, all the neighbors joining in for dear life, with the fear of death upon them, and each singing louder than the other to avoid remark. For in these fits he was the most overriding companion ever known. He would slap his hand on the table for silence all round. He would fly up in a passion of anger at a question, or sometimes because none was put, and so he judged the company was not following his story. Nor would he allow anyone to leave the inn until he had drunk himself sleepy and reeled off to bed. His stories were what frightened people worst of all. Dreadful stories they were, about hanging, and walking the plank, and storms at sea, and the dry Tortugas, and wild deeds in places on the Spanish Main. By his own account, he must have lived his life among some of the wickedest men that God had ever allowed on the sea, and the language in which he told these stories shocked our plain country people almost as much as the crimes that he described. My father was always saying the inn would be ruined, for people would soon cease coming there to be tyrannized over and put down and sent shivering to their beds. But I really believe his presence did us good. People were frightened at the time, but on looking back they rather liked it. It was a fine excitement in a quiet country life, and there was even a party of the younger men who pretended to admire him, calling him a true sea dog, and a real old salt, and such like names, and saying there was the sort of man that made England terrible at sea. In one way, indeed, he bade fair ruin to us, for he kept on staying week after week and last month after month, so that all the money had long been exhausted, and still my father never plucked up the heart to insist on having more. If ever he mentioned it, the captain blew through his nose so loudly that you might say he roared, and stared my poor father out of the room. I have seen him wringing his hands after such a rebuff, and I am sure the annoyance and the terror he lived in must have greatly hastened his early and unhappy death. All the time he lived with us, the captain made no change whatever in his dress but to buy some stockings from a hawker. One of these cocks of his hat having fallen out, he let it hang from that day forth, though it was great annoyance when it blew. I remember the appearance of his coat, which he patched himself upstairs in his room, and which, before the end, was nothing but patches. He never wrote or received a letter, and he never spoke with any but the neighbors, and for these, for the most part, only when drunk on rum. The great sea chest none of us had ever seen open. He was only once cross, and that was towards the end, when my poor father was far gone in a decline that took him off. Dr. Livesey came late one afternoon to see the patient, took a bit of dinner from my mother, and went into the parlor to smoke a pipe until his horse should come down from the hamlet, for we had no stabling at the old Benbow. I followed him in, and I remember observing the contrast, the neat, bright doctor with his powder as white as snow, and his bright black eyes and pleasant manners, made with the cultist country folk, and above all, with that filthy, heavy, bleared scarecrow of a pirate of ours, sitting, far gone in rum, with his arms on the table. Suddenly he, the captain that is, began to pipe up his eternal song. 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo ho ho and a bottle o' rum. Drinking the devil had done for the rest, yo ho ho and a bottle o' rum. Coffee break. Sorry, texting my roommate. Okay. At first I had supposed the dead man's chest to be that identical big box of his upstairs in the front room, and the thought had been mingled in my nightmares with that of the one-legged seafaring man. But by this time we had all long ceased to pay any particular notice to the song. It was new that night to nobody but Dr. Livesey, and on him I observed it did not produce an agreeable effect, for he looked up for a moment quite angrily before he went on with his talk to old Taylor the gardener on a new cure for rheumatics. In the meantime, the captain gradually brightened up at his own music, and at last flapped his hand on the table before him in a way we all knew to mean silence. The voices stopped at once. All but Dr. Livesey's. He went on as before, speaking clear and kind, and drawing briskly at his pipe between every word or two. The captain glared at him for a while, flapped his hand again, glared still harder, and at last broke out with a villainous low oath. "Silence there between decks!" "Were you addressing me, sir?" says the doctor. And when the ruffian had told him with another oath that this was so, "I have only one thing to say to you, sir," replies the doctor, "that if you keep on drinking rum, the world will soon be quit of a very dirty scoundrel." The old fellow's fury was awful. He sprang to his feet, drew and opened a sailor's clasp knife, and balancing it open on the palm of his hand, threatened to pin the doctor to the wall. The doctor never so much as moved. He spoke to him as before, over his shoulder, and in the same tone of voice, rather high, so that all the room might hear, but perfectly calm and steady. "If you do not put that knife this instant in your pocket, I promise, upon my honor, you shall hang at the next assizes." Here's a picture of the scene. It seems like a weird way to hold a knife. Just kind of having it in your palm, even though it's pointing straight down. Oh, is that little Jimbo? Hey, Jim. Hey ho, Jim. I'm sorry, I got Muppets on the mind. And the good doctor scolding him. Could imagine scolding a man who pulled a knife on me. Then followed a battle of looks between them, but the captain soon knuckled under, put up his weapon, and resumed his seat, grumbling like a beaten dog. "And now, sir," continued the doctor, "since I now know there's such a fellow in my district, you may count I'll have an eye upon you day and night. I'm not a doctor only, I'm a magistrate, and if I catch a breath of complaint against you, if it's only for a piece of incivility like tonight's, I'll take effectual means to have you hunted down and routed out of this. Let that suffice." Soon after, Dr. Livesey's horse came to the door and he rode away, but the captain held his peace that evening, and for many evenings to come. Chapter 2. Black Dog Appears and Disappears. Oh no! What? What a dramatic picture. Oh, okay, there's an eye in there. Okay. It's a person. Okay. It was not very long after this that there occurred the first of the mysterious events that rid us at last of the captain, though not, as you will see, of his affairs. It was
bitter cold winter, with long hard frosts and heavy gales, and it was plain from the first that my poor father was little likely to see the spring. He sank daily, and my mother and I all had the inn upon our hands, and were kept busy enough without paying much regard to our unpleasant guest. It was one January morning, very early, a pinching, frosty morning, the cove all grey with hoar frost, the ripple laughing softly up on the stones, the sun still low and only touching the hilltops and shining far to seaward. The captain had risen earlier than usual, and set out down the beach, his cutlass swinging under the broad skirts of his old blue coat, his brass telescope under his arm, his hat tilted back upon his head. I remember his breath hanging like smoke in his wake as he strode off, and the last sound I heard of him as he turned the big rock was a loud snort of indignation, as though his mind was still running upon Dr. Livesey. Well, mother was upstairs with father, and I was laying the breakfast table against the captain's return, when the parlor door opened, and a man stepped in on whom I had never set my eyes before. He was a pale, tallowy creature, wanting 2 fingers on the left hand, and though he wore a cutlass, he did not look much like a fighter. I had always my eye open for seafaring men, with one leg or two, and I remember this one puzzled me. He was not sailorly, and yet he had a smack of the sea about him too. I asked him what was for his service, and he said that he would take rum. But as I was going out of the room to fetch it, he sat down upon a table and motioned me to draw near. I paused where I was, with my napkin in my hand. "Come here, sonny," says he. "Come nearer here." I took a step nearer. "Is this your table for my mate Bill?" he asked with a kind of leer. I told him I did not know his mate Bill, and this was for a person who stayed in our house, whom we called the captain. "Well," said he, "my mate Bill would be called the captain, as like's not. He's a cut on one cheek, and a mighty pleasant way with him, particularly in drink, is my mate Bill. We'll put it, for argument like, that your captain is a cut on one cheek, and we'll put it, if you like, that that cheek's the right one. Ah, well, I told you. Now, is my mate Bill here in this house?" I told him he was out walking. "Which way, sonny? Which way's he gone?" And when I pointed on the rock and told him how the captain was likely to return and how soon, and answered a few other questions, "Ah," said he, "this'll be as good as drink to my mate Bill." The expression on his face as he said these words was not at all pleasant, and I had my own reasons for thinking that the stranger was mistaken, even supposing he meant what he said. But it was no affair of mine, I thought, and besides, it was difficult to know what to do. The stranger kept hanging about just inside the inn door, peering round the corner like a cat waiting for a mouse. Once I stepped out myself to go to the road, but he immediately called me back, and as I did not obey quick enough for his fancy, a most horrible change came over his tallowy face, and he ordered me in with an oath that made me jump. As soon as I was back again, he returned to his former manner, half fawning, half sneering, patted me on the shoulder, told me I was a good boy, and he had taken quite a fancy to me. "I have a son of my own," said he, as like he was 2 blocks, and he's all the pride of my art. But the great thing for boys is discipline, sonny. Discipline. Now, if you had sailed along of Bill, you wouldn't have stood there to be spoken to twice. Not you. That was never Bill's way, nor the way of sich that sailed with him. And there, sure enough, is my mate Bill, with a spy-glass under his arm, bless his art, to be sure. You and me'll just go back to the parlor, sonny, and get behind the door, and we'll give Bill a little surprise. Bless his art, I say again." So saying, the stranger backed along with me into the parlor and put me behind him in the corner so that we were both hidden by the open door. I was very uneasy and alarmed, as you may fancy, and it rather added to my fears to observe that the stranger was certainly frightened himself. He cleared the hilt of his cutlass and loosened the blade in the sheath, and all the time we were waiting there he kept swallowing as if his breakfast await as if oh gosh, He kept swallowing as if he felt that we used to call a lump in the throat. Felt what we used to call a lump in the throat. At last in strode the captain, slammed the door behind him without looking to the right or left, and marched straight across the room to where his breakfast awaited him. "Bill!" said the stranger, in a voice that I thought he had tried to make bold and big. The captain spun round on his heel and fronted us. All the brown had gone out of his face, and even his nose was blue. He had the look of a man who sees a ghost, or the evil one, or something worse, if anything can be, and upon my word, I felt sorry to see him all in a moment turn so old and sick. "Come, Bill, you know me. You know an old shipmate, Bill, surely," said the stranger. The captain made a sort of gasp. "Black Dog," said he. "And who else?" returned the other, getting more at his ease. "Black Dog as ever was, come for to see his old shipmate Billy at the Admiral Benbow Inn. Ah, Bill, Bill, we have seen a sight of times us two since I lost them 2 talons," holding up his mutilated hand. "Now look here," said the captain, "you've run me down. Here I am. Well then, speak up. What is it?" "That's you, Bill," returned Black Dog. "You're in the right of it, Billy. I'll have a glass of rum from this dear child here, as I've took such a liking to, and we'll sit down, if you please, and talk square, like old shipmates." When I returned with the rum, they were already seated on either side of the captain's breakfast table. Black Dog next to the door and sitting sideways, so as to have one eye on his old shipmate, and one, as I thought, on his retreat. He bade me go and leave the door wide open. "None o' your keyholes for me, sonny," he said, and I left them together and retired to the bar. For a long time, though I certainly did my best to listen, I could hear nothing but a low gattling. But at last the voices began to grow higher, and I could pick up a word or two, mostly oaths, from the captain. "No, no, 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 and an end of it!" he cried once. And again, "If it comes to swinging, swing all, say I." Ooh. Is Captain gonna fight? These pictures are a little spoilery, not gonna lie. Sorry, I have to text my roommate again. I hate to do that before the fight, but okay. Then, all of a sudden, there was a tremendous explosion of oaths and other noises. The chair and table went over in a lump, a clash of steel followed, and then a cry of pain. In the next instant I saw Black Dog in full flight, and the captain hotly pursuing, both with drawn cutlasses, and the former streaming blood from the left shoulder. Just at the door, the captain aimed at the fugitive one last tremendous cut, which would certainly have split him to the chine had it not been intercepted by our big signboard of Admiral Benbow. You may see the notch on the lower side of the frame to this day. That blow was the last of the battle. Once out upon the road, Black Dog, in spite of his wound, showed a wonderful clean pair of heels and disappeared over the edge of a hill in half a minute. The captain, for his part, stood staring at the signboard like a bewildered man. Then he passed his hand over his eyes several times, and at last turned back to the house. "Jim," says he, "rum!" And as he spoke he reeled a little, and caught himself with one hand against the wall. "Are you hurt?" cried I. "Rum!" he repeated. "I must get away from here. Rum! Rum!" I ran to fetch it, but I was quite unsteadied by all that had fallen out, and I broke one glass and fouled the tap, and while I was still getting in my own way, I heard a loud fall in the parlor, and, running in, beheld the captain lying full length upon the floor. At the same instant my mother, alarmed by the cries and the fighting, came running downstairs to help me. Between us we raised his head. He was breathing very loud and hard, but his eyes were closed, and his face a terrible color. "Dear, dearie me!" cried my mother. "What a disgrace upon the house! And your poor father sick!" In the meantime, we had no idea what to do to help the captain, nor any other thought but that he had got his death hurt in the scuffle with the stranger. I got the rum, to be sure, and tried to put it down his throat, but his teeth were tightly shut, and his jaws as strong as iron. It was a happy relief for us when the door opened, and Dr. Livesey came in on his visit to my father. "Oh, doctor!" we cried. "What shall we do? Where is he wounded?" "Wounded? A fiddlestick's end," said the doctor. "No more wounded than you or I. The man has had a stroke, as I warned him. Now, Mrs. Hawkins, just you run upstairs to your husband and tell him, if possible, nothing about it. For my part, I must do my best to save this fellow's trebly worthless life. Jim, you get me a basin." When I got back with the basin, the doctor had already ripped up the captain's sleeve and exposed his great sinewy arm. It was tattooed in several places. "Here's luck," "a fair wind," "Billy Bones his fancy," were very nearly and clearly executed on the forearm, and up near the shoulder there was a sketch of a gallows and a man hanging from it. Done, as I thought, with great spirit. "Prophetic," said the doctor, touching the picture with his finger. "And now, Master Billy Bones, if that be your name, we'll have a look at the colour of your blood." "Jim," he said, "are you afraid of blood?" "No, sir," said I. "Well, then," said he, "you hold the basin." And with that he took the lancet and opened a vein. A great deal of blood was taken before the captain opened his eyes and looked mistily about him. First he recognized the doctor with an unmistakable frown. Then his glance fell upon me, and he looked relieved. But suddenly his color changed, and he tried to raise himself, crying, "Where's Black Dog?" "There is no black dog here," said the doctor, "except what you have on your own back. You have been drinking rum, you have had a stroke, precisely as I told you, and I have just, very much against my own will, dragged you head foremost out of the grave. Now, Mr. Bones—" "That's not my name," he interrupted. "Much I care," returned the doctor. "It's the name of a buccaneer of my acquaintance, and I call you by it for the sake of shortness. And what I have to say to you is this. One glass of rum won't kill you, but if you take one, you'll take another, and I stake my wig if you don't break off short, you'll die. Do you understand that? Die, and go to your own place, like the man in the Bible. Come now, make an effort. I'll help you to your bed for once." Between us, with much trouble, we managed to hoist him upstairs, and laid him on his bed, where his head fell back on the pillow as if he were almost fainting. "Now mind you," said the doctor, "I clear my conscience. The name of rum for you is death." And with that he went off to see my father, taking me with him by the arm. "This is nothing," he said as he had closed the door. "I have drawn blood enough to keep him quiet a while. He should lie for a week where he is. That is the best thing for him and you. But another stroke would settle him." All right, folks. I think for this time, uh, I might call it for the day. Like I said, this was kind of an experiment. See if I could get the music and everything going at a good level. See how I felt about reading for long periods of time. You know, my voice isn't the strongest, but I feel pretty good. I'm having a good time. So hopefully the sound on this is pretty okay. And next time, we'll finish out part one probably. Um, yeah, so I'll be putting this up on the YouTube channel in the next couple of days, if it sounds alright. If it doesn't, we'll just do part one all the way through next time. I'm not bothered by it. Um, but yeah, I'm excited to finish reading Treasure Island. It's a little less difficult than I expected to get through the weird jargon of old-timey English, but um, it'll get better as it goes, I think. But thank y'all for watching. We'll be back next time for the rest of part one or chapter 3 of Treasure Island. We get our pirate on. All right, bye everybody. Have a good one.